Teachers, what's the weirdest thing you've had to take away from a student? It was December or January and we were having one of those lockdowns where the police come in with dogs to sniff for drugs. We were all locked in our classrooms and no students were allowed out, even to visit the restroom. One of my students was white as a ghost, very afraid. I asked him what's the matter, but it was obvious he was afraid he was about to get busted. He said, "Do you think the dogs will go to my locker?" I said, "I don't know. Do you have something to be worried about?" He said, "There's a ham and cheese sandwich in there." I scratched my head a bit. "I'm sure it's no problem to have a sandwich," he said. "Yeah, but it's been in there since September." That reminds me of this kid who spilled weeks old coffee that he had in his locker. Our class was in the same hall and dear God did it smell terrible. 3/4 of class time was spent brainstorming ways to save ourselves from the smell. No amount of X helped. Eyeballs. I worked with a blind student with autism. When he would get angry, he would pop out his glass eyeballs and throw them across the room. They were expensive, so mom asked that we put them in a plastic bag in his backpack if he threw them. No more eyeballs for you today. Not a teacher, but was part of almost eliminating the prize box in my kid's class. Kid is in kindergarten. I'm friends with a few of the other fathers in her class. One of the things her class has is a prize box. If the kids are all on their game for the week, or a kid does something especially good, they get to choose something from the box. It's filled with the kind of stuff you would find in a blister pack in the dollar store. Stuff like a little plastic car, or a bouncy ball or whatever. Anyway, the kids love it, the parents supply stuff for it. So one day my kid comes home with a freaking kazoo from the thing. Nothing like a 6-year-old who just figured out how a kazoo works while you are trying to work from home. So immediately I fire off an email to the list of my fellow dads asking what Wessy's put kazoos in the prize box, and then see that 2 other people had beat me to the question. One of the guys finally replies back, "Hey," and it was on. I counted with whistles. Someone else had this annoying popping thing. Someone else got the world's worst balsa planes. So like, the second time it flew it was destined to snap in half and upset your kid. This went on for like a good 2 weeks before someone crossed the line and sent in glitter. By this point the teacher was on to us, and told our wives on us. This is officially my favorite story here. An entire menagerie of live insects. One afternoon my class decided that they should see how many bugs they could capture and keep alive in my classroom. The next day, I returned from covering lunch duty in another part of the school and noticed that one of the cubbies had paper towel taped over the front like a curtain. Before I could investigate, I noticed several Tupperware containers hiding in desks. Dozens of worms, that was the cubby. Many assorted beetles, uncounted ants, 4 bees, a wasp, and, most upsetting, several flies which were crazy glued to index cards and had their wings removed. That was a long day in a long year. How TF did they safely catch a wasp? Was it loose in the room? Instant pudding. My student was mixing it in a large Cool Whip container, using milk from lunch, right in the middle of a lesson on Macbeth. They were making their own witch's brew. A whole salami. Kid kept walking over to his backpack and sticking his face in to take secret bites without me noticing. I noticed. This one is the funniest to me because it is just such a kid thing to do. This is my brother's story, and he was the kid. It was a sandwich bag full of spiders. He collected them during recess, and one of the monitors probably got freaked out. My brain omitted the bag when I read it the first time. I've never been more curious about lobotomies until now. First thing that came to mind, a drawing of a peanut. One kid said he had a peanut allergy, so a boy drew a peanut on a piece of paper and started shoving it in the other boy's face and being a general dong with it. Boom. Roasted. Christmas ornaments. They were throwing them at each other and it eventually caused a fight. Next to that would be a curtain rod. He found it and kept hitting people with it. BONK. Handcuffs. From an 8-year-old girl. Not quite police grade, but more than just some adult fun cuffs. Sent that down to the counselor. We had a 5th grade student of a police officer cuff his friend to the play structure on the playground a few years back. Had to call the campus cop over to figure it out. Poor lad didn't look any worse for wear. Just had to chill alone outside for a bit while his friends got back to class. My sister's teacher had to call my dad about a suspicious powder my sister was eating out of a bag at school. She was dipping her finger in a bag of powdered jello and eating it and letting other kids do the same. In a somewhat similar vein, a dumb trend went around my school that consisted of kids violently snorting dip dab powder, sherbet, then proceeding to scream in pain when they had a nosebleed and all pretend they were high. This was an all-girls school. Don't ever let the boys cool girls boring memes fool you. We also do dumb crap. A small trinket box, about palm-sized, decorated with gems and glitter, with a live mouse inside. The mouse was named Jimmy and had been caught in the child's house. Free my man Jimmy, he didn't do nothing wrong. A girl had about 50 plastic spoons in her pocket. She tripped and tea all fell out. We all found it hilarious, but a high-up teacher was walking by and made her pick them up. She was going to anyway, and put them all in the bin. He was probably very confused over the whole situation. Why would she even have them Lampheo and that many too? Obligatory, not a teacher. I'm an EA, educational assistant, in a school. Plastic spoons. Hundreds of them. I still don't know why, but one grade 5 kid came to school with his backpack stuffed full. Nothing else was in his backpack, not even his lunch. He hung it on the back of the chair and pulled out a spoon and was fiddling around with it instead of doing work. So I took the spoon away. 10 minutes later he has another one. I took that. 10 more minutes a third. The teacher took it away. 10 minutes later another. You can see the pattern here. I finally opened his backpack when I saw him grab the 6th or 7th spoon, and the bag was full. Obviously the teacher had to call home since he had no lunch. Mum comes, looks at him with just resignation, and goes why. She hands him his lunch. He shrugged, grinned, and walked back to class. Mom is clearly used to it and has learned to go with the flow. If I had a nickel for every time a worrying amount of plastic spoons was confiscated from a 5th grader in this post, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, it's just weird that it happened twice. Former teacher here. Wasn't part of the initial apprehension but was part of the follow-up investigation. Weirdest thing was a bag of turtles. Yep. Kid caught a bunch of the little salmonella-filled red-eared sliders at a local pond on his way to school one day. We had a turtle black market at the school by noon, and by the end of the day the principal had a dozen in a bowl in his office. Kid got caught because a terrible smell was reported from his locker. Janitor opened it up and there was a bag of turtles. The rest of the day was spent tracking down the ones that had already been sold. The way this is written definitely makes it sound like the principal had bought turtles from this black market. Not a teacher but a friend of a teacher. A letter to his other friend about how he once masturbated in class. They are extremely awkward now. Yup, incredibly strange that kids use letters these days. Texts would make much more sense. Ziploc bags filled with water. That was a trend for a while at my school. Kids would claim they needed it in case they got thirsty, but usually would just try to pop them in each other's laps during class. That is a very schoolboy thing, actually holding the thing that can frick you up for the sake of the game. A flavored condom. From a kindergartner. This little boy comes into music class at 1 p.m. or so, and he's been at school since 9 o'clock, and says to me, "Look, I have a candy," and holds up a wrapped strawberry flavored condom, trying to cause a scene. I tell him, "Remember, we're not going to eat in music class because it's hard to sing with candy in our mouths." I pointed out the pocket on his jean jacket with a snap button closure and tell him to put it in there, making a mental note to tell teacher later. I always try to avoid losing control of a room of 25-6-year-olds. Kid puts condom in his pocket, and I start music class. Later on, I see him putting something in his mouth. Put that back in your pocket for after school or something to that effect. Pretty sure food is scarce at home, to taking it away would have been a huge scene. Teacher comes at the end of the half-hour lesson and I discreetly tell her what's going on and she says she'll handle it. Great. After school, the middle-aged, male school counselor comes up to me and says, "Thanks to you I've been walking around an elementary school all afternoon with a flavored condom in my pocket. Sorry not sorry." Why would he keep it in his pocket, lol? A can of deodorant. You're probably thinking, hey, that's not that weird, except that the two kids were using it by spraying it on the back of the other and then setting fire to the thing in the middle of the class. They didn't see any problem with it because it only stays lit for a few seconds. Oh my god, the kids at my middle school did this too. We had an entire assembly where they yelled at us about it. A kid brought blue Gatorade in a Windex bottle to lunch on April Fool's Day and we had to take it so younger kids wouldn't think it was real. Thank you so much for the awards and upvotes. I never expected this. Better than my friend who always had a bottle of mouthwash that was actually just vodka with food coloring. Then in college there was the girl with the Starbucks cup of wine. In middle school we had a special currency that they'd hand out to students for helping out or being kind that would then be able to be used to buy books or other small trinkets. Somehow during the year I obtained a bunch of dental plaque pills. They turn the plaque on your teeth a certain color to help you brush your teeth, I guess. In this case it was a dark purple, and I didn't brush my teeth very well at the time, so taking one would make my entire mouth a deep purple color. I thought I'd freak out my school friends with one and they all thought it was really cool and wanted to know how I did it. So I bring some more the next day and give a couple out to friends who then show other kids and tell them that I can make their mouths purple too. So next day I brought all my plaque pills to school and start charging $1 in school currency for one pill. Sometimes if a kid didn't have money I'd make them give me whatever cool stuff they had that I needed. Keychains, pencil sharpeners, whatever they were willing to trade. And of course all these other middle schoolers didn't do a good job of brushing their teeth either, so every kid I sold a pill to ended up with a dark purple color coating their entire mouth. Well, a bunch of kids' mouths turning purple was quickly noticed by multiple staff members. Who would have guessed? And apparently I went to school with a bunch of little narcs because very quickly I found myself in the principal's office. They took all my pills, my school money and most of the other items that they were able to prove didn't belong to me, even though I traded it fair and square. Principal was livid. All I remember of the end result was waiting in the office getting yelled at by the principal, zoning off as I imagined all the ways I was going to get my butt beat when my dad eventually came to pick me up and this angry principal told him all about my little operation. But miraculously some lady came out of a room saying, "Hey principal, your meeting is starting right now, we can't wait any longer." And the principal looking frustrated but telling me that they would be right back and that I was still in a lot of trouble. And as soon as they walked into another room my dad walked in and asked if I was ready to go, which was answered with a very hasty yup. The rest of the year felt like some weird Twilight Zone. None of the other kids mentioned it again. Dad never mentioned it. Staff never mentioned it. Never talked to the principal again and made sure to avoid them like the plague. I never got in trouble, and I will never understand how. Now I just sell coke like a responsible adult. I don't want to any of that purple butt tooth pill crap here ever again. Just be a responsible adult and sell coke. Not a teacher, but in 3rd grade the teacher had to confiscate all the origami cranes in the room because one kid decided to make and sell them at $0.25 a piece. He got caught when he started selling on the playground. I thought it was fricked up we had to give up all the paper cranes in our desks, but we didn't get our quarters back. I named mine Swan and was very sad to see her go. This seems pretty harmless. I don't understand why people bother. It's just kids stuff. Also, your crane's name made me chuckle. Not a teacher, but my 3rd grade teacher had to confiscate a dead rat from a kid in my class. I, to this day, have no idea where the kid got it from. Live rats are hard to catch. Dead rats not so much. Panties. They had fallen out of a girl's gym bag in the previous class. When I came in the room after standing duty in the hall, 3 boys were flinging them back and forth across the room. Never a dull moment. I'm not a teacher, but I taught my friend in 8th grade how to make pipe cleaner caterpillars. Since our school was discarding hundreds of bags of pipe cleaners, she found them all, put them in her backpack, and made these caterpillars. The only thing is, she made around 1,000 of them until our teacher realized. The teacher tossed them in the garbage, but they just changed it. So while the teacher wasn't looking, she grabbed them all and put them back in her desk. Stealth 100. During my student teaching, I had to utter a sentence I never imagined, which was, "Guys, what did I say about looking up satanic rituals during class?" They were a great group, though. It was a group of 4 8th graders who said they had created an occult detective agency and were doing research just in case. My only complaint was that they were doing it in science class instead of actually doing their work. Dang creative AF. A can of Cheese Whiz. It was from a student visiting from another country, and she was enamored of the incredible canned cheese product she had discovered. So much so, she kept either opening her backpack to stare lovingly at it or taking it out during class to get some sweet cheesy goodness. It was pretty cute actually, and I made sure she got her cheese product returned to her at the end of class. Man, did she love Cheese Whiz. That's hilarious. I feel like a lot of people would remember her as Cheese Whiz girl. A homemade shiv. His dad has just gotten out of jail and given it to him, so he brought it to school. I teach kindergarten. BTW. That's less weird and more sad and messed up. This kid had a backpack full of baby rabbits. He found them in the field on the way to school. They were so tiny and vulnerable. We both cried. I did a brief stint as a supply teacher in my early 20s. One day I was at a school I'd never been to before, and there was a group of lads gathered round a table at the back of the room, generally not paying much attention to the lesson. I went to investigate and found they were working on a full-blown diagram of how a male might go about sucking himself off. I confiscated it for research purposes. I've told this story before on Reddit, but it really fits here. One of our 3rd grade teachers had a little boy come to her desk first thing in the morning with an object in his mouth that he was blowing on to make a noise. He said something like, "Look, Mrs. Smith, I found this nice whistle in the wastebasket at home." Mrs. Smith recognized the object as an applicator for a product used for vaginal yeast infections. The children went to gym class soon after morning announcements, and Mrs. Smith noted that the object was left on his desk. She threw it away in the teacher's workroom and called his mother to let her know for the future so that she could take more care with her trash. I imagine him one day seeing his girlfriend or wife discard the same object into their bathroom trash and the horrible realization hitting him. Not a teacher, but our vice principal had to confiscate a lobster from us after we bought it as a birthday gift for a friend. For those asking, it was a live lobster. We wrapped it in a box with some holes poked in it. When we presented it to him during first break, he just heard something scratching inside it and asked, "WTF is this?" Had to take a computer away from a kid because he had 2 Google tabs, search and images, open with the search naked nude Pokemon P in class. Taking a computer away isn't super weird, but that reason has stuck with me for a while. Not a teacher, but my brother was once asked to return his history teacher's beans, which he had stolen from one of the drawers of said teacher's desk. My mother was a primary school teacher. One day many years ago, she was working as a supply teacher filling in for an absent teacher. It was late 80s and Casio watches were all the rage. Every hour, on the hour, many watches would sound a chime to signal the start of a new hour. My mother had been hearing chimes and alarms going off all day, and she announced, "The next watch I hear beeping is coming home with me tonight." Moments later a watch chimed. It was my brother's colon. A picture they'd drawn of me in a teeny bikini. At the time I was a fairly out of shape man in my late 30s. Not a good look. The care they'd taken drawing a pair of gigantic pendulous breasts, which I don't have, was unsettling. The same student also wrote Forkrin in a bikini on a feedback form asking if there was anything they needed in class. Not a teacher, but my wife is. Several years ago she was teaching 2nd or 4th grade and the kids were instructed to have their snack time. She stepped over to the door to talk to another teacher while the kids ate, and one student came over and tattled that another student had a snack he should not have. My wife scolded the tattler for tattling LOL, but the kid was insistent. Wife decided to check, and the other kid had legit cracked open a Bud Light Lime-A-Rita for snack time. Student teaching. Tarantula and a newborn rat. Separate times but both from the same student. First full year. Jar of his boogers he had been saving from a bet with his friend that he wouldn't fill the jar. 6th graders are something. Second year. First day of school for a new student. Seemed shifty in hour 0 period but thought it was nervousness. While during lunch someone set off a homemade bomb in a lunch trash can. 5th period comes, and though kids saw who did it, they did not want to be a snitch. So open backpack search and found the 2 others he was hiding. 3rd year. Jar of mayo that the kid kept eating with his hands in class. Currently in my 4th year, but distance learning. Before I was student teaching or a teacher, I worked as an instructional aide for a non-public school that was a part of a residential group home. My students I worked were basically at last chance before being sent out of state or wards of the state due to failure of the foster system, legally separated from family, or juvenile hall residents. I have many stories of weird, gross, and disturbing items I had to confiscate. Last part sounds sad. My mom used to be an aide for a similar school and she said she couldn't handle it. I have respect for you. Not me, but my co-teacher tells the story of having to take a vibrator away from a student during band class. The only reason he knew the kid had it was because the kid tried to play the xylophone with the thing. I've answered this question before, so I figured I'd just copy paste. Well, this is my freaking time to shine. My co-worker and I had a mild prank war going on. Somehow, the students caught wind and decided to instigate by stealing things from his room and taking it to mine and vice versa. Here are some of the things I've had to take from them and return to him. His car keys, his entire desktop computer, portraits of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, pumpkins from his Halloween decorations, his desk chair, his car keys again, a student desk, his travel mug with his name on it. At this point I'm convinced my co-worker just doesn't want his car, and somehow, in the 5 minutes between his class and mine, they managed to flip all the desks in his classroom upside down. I'm not making this up. Not a teacher, but I had a kid in class that would collect used chewing gums from under the table and form them to a giant gross ball. During the lesson he would suck and chew on it and roll it all over the desk. My teacher had enough of it and threw the thing in the trash and the kid cried. After the lesson the kid got it out of the trash and chewed on it. Excuse me, but WTF. I was a student, but I had a bunch of expended munitions, including an expended CS grenade, think tear gas, taken from me by my 7th grade vice principal. I used to scour the NATO training grounds when my dad was stationed in Germany in the 70s. I found an expended CS grenade and brought it, and other finds, to school to show off to my friends. Not knowing there had been a terror bombing earlier that day at another NATO facility, I brought a bunch of my stuff to school. They brought a bomb dog onto our school bus at the Ramstein AFB gate. The dog ignored me. I was showing off the grenade to my friends when the teacher walked in. The grenade had been expended, but CS is really a fine dust and the active material was gently dusting the room. She could easily smell the tear gas and sent me to the office. They took my stuff, chided me for bringing it, and returned it 2 weeks later. A few weeks after that the vice principal asked if I had everything returned. I said I had. He said someone turned in a 105mm shell casing into lost and found and offered it to me. I gladly took it. Being the 70s, everyone was chill. The teacher was right to get that nasty stuff out of her class. And I scored another cool thing. Today, they would have had the SWAT team there and I might well have had to go to court. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.